I
What
don't
would you do
understand.
if a
What did I do?
stranger's child looked at you with your husband's eyes?
You are under arrest.
Thomas Hartwell had everything.
You have the right to remain
a
silent.
billion-dollar empire, a beautiful daughter, a perfect life built on the ashes of his dead wife's memory. Then his 5-year-old daughter pointed at a boy in the park and
You
said
have until
7
midnight
words
to
that
sign
shattered
these
everything.
papers, Margaret, or you get
He
nothing.
was in Mommy's tummy,
Your
too.
threats mean nothing to
That
me,
boy,
Thomas. I will not be
raised by a
pressured.
single mother working 2 cleaning
Please,
rooms.
he needs me.
A woman named Karen, who had no idea the child she adopted
Liam.
was stolen from a family more powerful than she could imagine. And when Karen tried to do the right thing, she was arrested for kidnapping, thrown in jail, her son ripped from her arms. But here's what the Billionaire family didn't count on. Karen Thompson doesn't break. And the secrets they buried, they're about to crawl out of the grave. This story has betrayal, murder, a grandmother willing to kill to protect her legacy, and one mother who refused to quit. Stay with me until the end, because the twist at the 40-minute mark, you won't see it coming. If stories about women who fight back speak to your soul, you feel any of art in the right place. Hit subscribe, leave a comment telling me what you think will happen, and let's dive in. The afternoon sun painted everything gold as Thomas Hartwell pushed his daughter on the swing. Olivia's laughter rang out like tiny bells, and for a moment, the weight of running a billion-dollar company melted away. These Saturday afternoons at the park were sacred, just him and his little girl. "Higher, Daddy, higher!" Thomas obliged, giving the swing another gentle push. Olivia was 5 years old now, all blonde curls and bright blue eyes, the spitting image of her late mother, Sarah. Every time he looked at his daughter, he saw the woman he had lost 3 years ago. The swing slowed as Olivia stopped pumping her legs. Her laughter died. She was staring across the playground with an intensity that made Thomas's stomach clench. "Daddy," her voice had changed. Gone was the carefree child. In her place was someone older, someone who knew things she shouldn't know. "What is it, sweetheart?" Olivia pointed at a boy playing alone on the smaller slide. He was thin, with sandy brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. "That boy," Olivia said, "he was in Mommy's tummy, too." Thomas laughed nervously. "Sweetie, you don't have a brother. You know that." "Yes, I do." Olivia turned to face her father, and the certainty in her blue eyes made his blood run cold. "Someone took him away." Thomas opened his mouth to respond, to explain, to rationalize. But then the boy turned around and Thomas Hartwell felt the world shift beneath his feet. The child had his eyes, not similar, not resembling, identical. The same shade of blue that Thomas saw every morning in the mirror. The same slight downturn at the corners. The same flecks of gray near the pupils. The boy saw them looking and froze. Fear flashed across his face, raw and primal. And then he ran. A woman chased after him. Dark hair, tired eyes, moving with the desperate speed of a mother protecting her child. She caught the boy near the water fountain and knelt down, pulling him into her arms. Thomas watched them, his mind racing. It was impossible. Sarah had only one child. The pregnancy had been difficult, dangerous even, and bringing Olivia into the world had nearly killed her all. But those eyes. "Daddy?" Olivia tugged at his sleeve. "Why did my brother run away?" Thomas didn't have an answer. He didn't have anything except a feeling that his entire life was about to unravel. 2 hours earlier, Karen Thompson had woken at 5 in the morning to the sound of her alarm. She lay in the darkness for exactly 30 seconds, allowing herself that small luxury before swinging her legs out of bed and starting another day. She checked on Liam first. He was still sleeping, his small body curled around a stuffed rabbit that had lost most of its fur. Karen watched him breathe for a moment, letting the sight of him fill her with the strength she would need. The kitchen was cold. The heat had been spotty again, and calling the landlord meant risking another confrontation about the rent she was 3 days late on. Karen made a mental note to pick up an extra shift if possible. She made Liam's lunch with the efficiency of long practice. Peanut butter on both slices of bread so the jelly wouldn't make it soggy. An apple she had been saving. A juice box that was on sale, 2 for $1. She packed everything into his faded superhero lunchbox and set it by the door. Her neighbor Elena was already awake, standing in her doorway with a cup of coffee and a knowing look. "You look like Death's prettier sister," Elena said. Karen managed a tired smile. "Thanks. Death wishes she had my cheekbones. You working both jobs today? Morning at the office building, afternoon at the Henderson house. I'll pick up Liam Arion for. Elena shook her head. You are going to run yourself into the ground, girl. Ground's not so bad, Karen said, grabbing her cleaning supplies. At least it's stable. She worked through the morning in a haze of vacuum cleaners and furniture polish. The office building was downtown, all glass and chrome, filled with people who never looked at her. Karen had learned to be invisible. Invisible people didn't cause problems. Invisible people kept their jobs. By 2 o'clock, she had finished both shifts and picked up Liam from Mrs. Patterson, the elderly widow down the hall who watched him for free in exchange for Karen doing her grocery shopping. Mommy! Liam ran into her arms and everything else disappeared. The exhaustion, the worry, the constant grinding fear that she wasn't enough. Hey, baby, ready for the park? The park was their Saturday tradition. Karen couldn't afford movies or restaurants or the fancy play places other kids went to, but the park was free. The park was theirs. She had been watching Liam play when the little girl approached him. Karen noticed her immediately. Expensive clothes, perfect blonde curls. The kind of child who probably had a nanny and a trust fund. Karen's first instinct was to call Liam away. Rich kids meant rich parents, and rich parents meant trouble. But then she saw them together. The two children were talking like they had known each other forever. They moved in sync, finished each other's sentence, laughed at the same moments. It was strange, beautiful, unsettling. The man came next. Tall, well-dressed, moving with the easy confidence of someone who had never worried about money in his life. Karen saw Liam notice him, and she saw her son's face transform into something she had never seen before, pure terror. Liam ran. Karen caught him near the fountain, her heart pounding. Baby, what's wrong? What happened? Liam was crying, his small body shaking against hers. He looks like the bad people, Mommy. The ones in my dreams. Karen held him tighter. What dreams, Liam? What bad people? But Liam couldn't answer. He just cried and Karen rocked him. And across the park, a man with her son's eyes watched them with the expression of someone whose world had just ended. That night, after Liam was asleep, Karen sat at her small kitchen table and stared at a folder she hadn't opened in 5 years. Liam's adoption papers. She had adopted him through a private arrangement when he was 3 months old. A lawyer had contacted her through a church program for single mothers wanting to adopt. The process had been simple, almost too simple, but Karen had been so desperate for a child that she hadn't questioned it. Now, with trembling hands, she opened the folder. She had never looked at the birth mother's name, hadn't wanted to know. The woman had given up her child, and Karen had given him a home, and that was the end of the story. But the story wasn't over. The birth mother's name was printed in neat black letters. Sarah Hartwell. Karen reached for her phone, typed the name into the search bar, and as the results loaded, as the photos and headlines and obituaries filled her screen, Karen Thompson realized that she hadn't saved Liam at all. She had taken him from a family that could have given him everything, and now they were going to take him back. Thomas Hartwell couldn't sleep. He lay in his king-sized bed in his $30 million mansion and stared at the ceiling like a man haunted. The boy's face wouldn't leave him. Those eyes. His eyes. At 2 in the morning, he gave up on rest entirely. He went to his study, to the locked filing cabinet where he kept everything related to Sarah. Medical records, hospital bills, the paperwork of grief. He pulled out the folder labeled Pregnancy and Birth and began to read. Something was wrong. Thomas had built his career on details. He had turned a family fortune into a global empire by noticing what others missed. And right now, every instinct he had developed over 20 years in businesses was screaming at him. The file was too thin. Sarah's pregnancy had been complicated, dangerous. She had spent weeks on bed rest, had multiple hospital visits, had nearly died during delivery. There should have been dozens of pages of documentation. Instead, he was looking at maybe 10 pages total. Someone had removed records. Thomas picked up his phone and called the hospital. It took 30 minutes and 3 transfers before he reached someone in medical records. I need the complete file for my late wife, he said. Sarah Hartwell. She gave birth there 6 years ago. I'm sorry, Mr. Hartwell. The administrator's voice was carefully neutral. Those records have been sealed by family request. I didn't request anything. The request came from Margaret Hartwell, his mother. Thomas ended the call and sat in the darkness, feeling the shape of something monstrous forming in the shadows. His mother had always been controlling, cold, obsessed with the family image. But sealing medical records? What could possibly be in those files that she needed to hide? The next morning, Thomas went to see her. Margaret Hartwell lived in the family estate, a sprawling mansion that had been in the Hartwell name for 4 generations. She received Thomas in the sunroom, surrounded by flowers that cost more than most people made in a month. "Darling," she offered her cheek for a kiss. "What brings you here so early? Why did you seal Sarah's medical records?" Margaret's expression didn't change. She had spent 62 years perfecting the art of revealing nothing. "You were so fragile after Sarah's death," she said smoothly. "I handled the paperwork to spare you the trauma." "What paperwork required sealing medical records?" "The kind that protects this family's reputation." Thomas felt his jaw tighten. "What does that mean, Mother?" Margaret picked up her teacup and took a delicate sip. "It means that some things are better left buried. Sarah is gone. Olivia is healthy and happy. Why torture yourself with questions that don't matter?" "They matter to me." "Then perhaps you should examine why." Margaret set down her cup and met her son's eyes. "The past is a dangerous place, Thomas. The people who dig there often don't like what they find." Thomas left his mother's house with more questions than answers, in a growing certainty that his family had been lying to him for years. Karen spent the night researching. Sarah Hartwell had been beautiful, wealthy, the kind of woman who appeared on society pages and charity event photos. She had married Thomas Hartwell III in a ceremony that had made national news. She had given birth to a daughter named Olivia, and 3 years ago, she had died of sudden complications from a previous surgery. Nothing in the official record mentioned a son, but Karen had the adoption papers. She had the birth mother's name, and she had a little boy sleeping in the next room who looked exactly like a billionaire's daughter. She knew she should run, take Liam and disappear before anyone connected the dots. But where would she go? She had no money, no family, no resources, and running would mean admitting she had done something wrong. But she hadn't done anything wrong. She had adopted a child legally. She had the paperwork to prove it, didn't she? Karen pulled out her phone and found the number for a free legal aid hotline. She waited on hold for 45 minutes before a tired voice answered. "Legal aid. How can I help you?" Karen explained her situation in halting words. The adoption, the name she had found, the fear that was eating her alive. The voice on the other end was surprisingly kind. "First thing you need to know is that you shouldn't make major decisions when you're in fight or flight mode. Document everything, assume nothing, and whatever you do, don't run. That makes you look guilty even if you're innocent." "So what do I do?" "You get ahead of it. If there's a biological father out there, approach him, explain, show him the paperwork. Most of the time, these things can be worked out between adults without lawyers getting involved." Karen thanked the woman and hung up. Then she sat in her cold apartment and made a decision. She would go to Thomas Hartwell. She would tell him everything. She would prove that she had adopted Liam legally, and they would figure this out like reasonable people. It was the smart thing to do, the right thing to do. It was also the worst mistake of her life. Karen put on her best clothes. They weren't much. A blouse that was only slightly faded, pants without stains, shoes that didn't have holes. She looked at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror and tried to see what Thomas Hartwell would see. A poor woman, a nobody, someone who had no business raising a child connected to one of the wealthiest families in the country, but also a mother, and that had to count for something. She left Liam with Mrs. Patterson and took 3 buses to the gleaming tower that housed Hartwell Industries. The building was 60 stories of glass and steel, a monument to wealth and power. Karen stood on the sidewalk and felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. But she thought of Liam, his laugh, his hugs, the way he said "mommy" like it was the most important word in the world. She walked inside. Getting past security was easier than expected. She told the guard she had information about Thomas Hartwell's wife, and something in her expression must have convinced him because he made a call and 5 minutes later, she was in an elevator heading to the top floor. Thomas Hartwell's office was bigger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. The furniture probably cost more than she would make in 10 years. And there he was, the man from the park, Liam's biological father. He was younger than she had expected, tired-looking. Grief lived in the lines of his face, in the slight slump of his shoulders that even expensive suits couldn't hide. "You said you have information about my wife." His voice was careful, controlled. "Not about her exactly." Karen pulled out the adoption folder with shaking hands. "About your son." Thomas's face went still. "I don't have a son." "You do." Karen spread the papers on his desk. "His name is Liam. I adopted him 5 years ago. I didn't know who his birth mother was until yesterday. Until I saw your daughter at the park and realized." She couldn't finish, couldn't find the words to explain the impossible thing that had happened. Thomas picked up the adoption papers and read them. His hands began to tremble. "Sarah," he whispered. "Sarah's name is on these." "I know, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, I swear I didn't know." Thomas looked up, and Karen saw tears in his eyes. Not anger, not accusation, just overwhelming grief and something that might have been hope. "He's real," Thomas said. "My son is real. He's alive. He's wonderful." Karen found herself crying too. "He's smart and kind and so brave. I've raised him the best I could. I know I couldn't give him what you could have given him, but I loved him. I love him. I want to meet him." Thomas stood up, energized. "I want to know my son." "We can arrange that. We can figure this out. I just wanted you to know the truth." Thomas walked around the desk and took Karen's hands. Thank you. Thank you for taking care of him. Thank you for telling me. You're not angry?" "Angry? I'm grateful." Thomas smiled, and for a moment, Karen believed everything would be okay. They made plans to meet at the park the next day. Thomas would bring Olivia. Karen would bring Liam. The twins would see each other again, and the adults would work out the details. Karen left the office feeling lighter than she had in years. The weight she had carried for 5 years, the secret fear that something about Liam's adoption wasn't right, began to lift. She was still smiling when she walked out of the building. She was still smiling when 2 police officers stepped in front of her. "Karen Thompson?" "Yes." "You're under arrest for kidnapping." The world stopped. "What? No, I have legal adoption papers. I just showed them to Mr. Hartwell. He knows. He understands." "Those documents have been flagged as fraudulent." The officer pulled out handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." No, this is a mistake. Please. I have a son. He needs me. Please." But the handcuffs clicked shut, and Karen was dragged toward a waiting police car as onlookers stopped to stare and point and take pictures. And in the lobby window of Hartwell Industries, a woman with silver hair and cold eyes watched with satisfaction. Margaret Hartwell pulled out her phone and made a call. "The problem is being handled." Liam was watching cartoons when the police came. Mrs. Patterson tried to stop them, but she was 83 years old and frail, and there were 2 of them with badges and authority and a warrant signed by a judge. "Where's my mommy?" Liam asked as a strange woman in a gray suit bent down to his level. "Your mommy had to go away for a while," the woman said. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe." "I don't want to go somewhere safe. I want my mommy." "I know, sweetheart, but this is how it has to be." They put Liam in a car that smelled like fake flowers. They drove him to a building with too many fluorescent lights and too many sad children. That night, in a bed that wasn't his, in a room that wasn't his, Liam cried himself to sleep. And somewhere across the city, in a jail cell she never should have been in, Karen did the same. Thomas stormed into his mother's house without bothering to knock. Margaret was in her study, signing papers with the calm efficiency of a woman who had never been surprised by anything in her life. "You had her arrested," Thomas's voice shook with fury. "The woman who raised my son, you had her arrested." "I had a kidnapper detained." Margaret didn't look up from her papers. "The police agreed with my assessment." "She didn't kidnap anyone, she adopted him legally?" "With forged documents." Margaret finally set down her pen and met her son's eyes. Documents that were designed to hide the truth about where that child came from. "And where did he come from, Mother? Tell me. Because I've been asking that question for days, and no one will give me a straight answer. Margaret was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was cold. That woman is nobody. She took what belongs to this family. I am simply correcting the situation. Liam is my son. Liam is a mistake that should have been erased 5 years ago. The words hung in the air between them. Thomas felt something inside him shift, break, reform into something harder and darker. What did you do, Mother? What did you do 5 years ago? Margaret's face remained impassive. I protected this family, as I have always done, as I will continue to do. Thomas left without another word, but as he drove away, he pulled out his phone and called a number he had hoped he would never need. I need a private investigator, he said, the best you have, and I need them immediately. Karen sat in an interrogation room and told her story for the fourth time. I adopted Liam through a private arrangement. A lawyer contacted me through a church program. Everything was legal. I have the paperwork. The paperwork is forged, the detective said. The signatures don't match. The notary stamp is from an office that closed 10 years ago, sir. That's impossible. It's not impossible, Miss Thompson. It's fact. The detective leaned forward. Here's what I think happened. You found out who the boy really was, and you went to his father to extort money. When that didn't work, you played the victim. That's not what happened. Then explain what did happen. Karen tried. She tried until her voice gave out and her throat ached, and the detective finally called for a guard to take her back to her cell. That night, lying on a thin mattress in a room that smelled like despair, Karen made herself a promise. They wanted her to break. They wanted her to give up so they could erase her like they had erased Liam's real mother. But she was still breathing, and as long as she was breathing, she would fight. Thomas's private investigator was a woman named Sandra Chen. She had short gray hair, sharp eyes, and a reputation for finding things that powerful people wanted to stay hidden. You want me to investigate your own mother, Sandra said when Thomas explained the situation. I want you to find the truth, whatever that turns out to be. And if the truth is worse than you expect? Thomas thought of Liam, of the fear in the boy's eyes when he saw Thomas at the park, of Karen sitting in jail for a crime she didn't commit. Then I need to know. Sandra nodded. I'll be in touch. 3 days later, she called him with the first piece of the puzzle. Sarah Hartwell wasn't pregnant with twins, Sandra said. She wasn't pregnant at all. Thomas felt the ground shift beneath him. That's impossible. Olivia is my daughter. Olivia is your daughter, but Sarah wasn't her biological mother. Sandra's voice was carefully neutral, the way it always was when she delivered devastating news. I found the real birth records. They were hidden, but nothing stays hidden forever. Tell me, before you married Sarah, you had a relationship with a woman named Jessica Cole, a waitress at your college town. Thomas closed his eyes. He remembered Jessica, brief summer romance, nothing serious. They had parted ways when he returned to business school. She got pregnant, Sandra continued, with twins. Your mother found out and paid her $50,000 to go away and handle it. Handle it? Your mother assumed Jessica would terminate the pregnancy. She didn't. She gave birth alone in a county hospital. But there were complications. Jessica died, and your mother was left with 2 newborn babies she didn't want. Thomas couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only listen as Sandra dismantled everything he thought he knew. Your mother took both children. She gave the girl to Sarah, who couldn't have children, and told her some story to explain it. The boy was supposed to be adopted out immediately, erased from existence. But something went wrong with the adoption process. The lawyer your mother hired made mistakes. The boy ended up with Karen Thompson, and your mother lost track of him. 5 years, Thomas whispered. My son has been out there for 5 years. There's more. Sandra's voice dropped. And this part is worse. Tell me. Sarah found out the truth 3 years ago. She discovered that Olivia wasn't her biological child and that there was a twin brother somewhere. She threatened to tell you everything. Thomas thought of Sarah, her kindness, her warmth, the way she had looked at him in those final weeks, like she was carrying a weight too heavy to bear. 2 weeks after Sarah confronted your mother, she died, Sandra said. Sudden complications from an old surgery, according to the official record. You think my mother killed her? I think your mother has spent 60 years protecting the Hartwell name, and I think she's willing to do anything to keep doing it. Thomas sat in his empty office and stared at the wall. His wife was dead because she knew the truth. His son was lost because his mother couldn't accept a mistake. And Karen Thompson was in jail because she had been unlucky enough to love a child who was never supposed to exist. Tomorrow, he would start fixing it. Tomorrow, he would begin the work of destroying his own family to save the people who deserve saving. But tonight, Thomas Hartwell let himself grieve for everything he had lost and everything he had never known. Liam sat in the corner of the group room at the foster facility and watched the other children play. He was supposed to join them. The counselor had encouraged him to make friends, to participate, to adjust. But Liam didn't want to adjust. He wanted his mother. 3 weeks had passed since the police took him away. 3 weeks of strange beds and strange faces and the constant gnawing fear that he would never see his mommy again. The other kids said his mother was a criminal. They had seen it on the news. They whispered about him when they thought he couldn't hear. But Liam knew the truth. His mommy wasn't a criminal. His mommy was the strongest person in the world. She would come for him. She had promised. That night after lights out, Liam made a decision. He wasn't going to wait anymore. He was going to find her himself. The facility had a fence, but Liam was small. He found a gap near the back where the chain link had rusted and pulled away from the post. He squeezed through, feeling the metal scratch his arms, and then he was free. The streets were dark and cold. Liam didn't know where to go, but he started walking. His mother was somewhere in this city. If he walked far enough, he would find her. He made it 6 blocks before a police car found him. The officer was kind, at least. He wrapped Liam in a blanket and gave him hot chocolate and didn't yell when Liam couldn't stop crying. "I want my mommy," Liam said over and over. "I want my mommy." But they took him back to the facility, and now there was a report in his file. Flight risk, unstable, traumatized. Karen was allowed 1 phone call per week. She used it to call the public defender who had been assigned to her case. "The bail hearing is tomorrow," the lawyer said, "but I have to be honest with you, it's not looking good." "Why not?" "New evidence has come forward. Photos of you entering Hartwell Industries, phone records, and a witness who claims you tried to extort Thomas Hartwell for money." "That's a lie. I went to tell him the truth." "I believe you. But believing you isn't the same as proving your innocence." Karen hung up the phone and walked back to her cell. That night, she dreamed of Liam. He was crying, calling for her, and she was running toward him. But the hallway kept getting longer, and she could never reach him, no matter how fast she ran. She woke up with tears on her face and the taste of despair in her mouth. The bail hearing was worse than Karen had feared. Thomas was there. He testified on her behalf, explained that Karen had come to him voluntarily, that she had shown him the adoption papers, that she clearly believed she had done nothing wrong. For a moment, Karen felt hope. The judge was listening. The evidence was clear. And then Victoria Shaw walked into the courtroom. Karen had never seen the woman before, but she recognized the type. Expensive clothes, perfect makeup, the kind of beauty that was purchased rather than born. Victoria was Thomas's sister-in-law, married to his deceased brother, and she had come to destroy Karen. "Your Honor," Victoria's voice was honey and poison, "I have evidence that this woman is not the innocent victim she claims to be." She presented photographs of Karen entering Hartwell Industries, phone records showing a call to Thomas's office the day before her visit, and a witness statement from a security guard who claimed Karen had said she was there to get what she deserved. "This woman discovered who the boy was and went to blackmail his biological father," Victoria said. "When the extortion attempt failed, she was arrested and started playing victim." "That's not what happened." Karen stood up, and her lawyer had to pull her back down. The judge's face had changed. The sympathy was gone. In its place was the cold calculation of someone who had seen too many criminals claim innocence. "Bail denied," the judge said. "Trial set for 90 days. Karen was led back to jail. Through the courtroom window, she caught a glimpse of Victoria Shaw watching her go. And behind Victoria, standing in the shadows, was an older woman with silver hair and eyes like winter. Margaret Hartwell. The catastrophes came one after another. First, Liam's escape attempt. The report painted him as disturbed, dangerous, a child who couldn't be trusted. Karen wasn't even allowed to speak to him on the phone. Second, her apartment. A health inspector found violations that Karen had never heard of, and the building was condemned. All her belongings, everything she owned, every photo of Liam's childhood was destroyed. Third, Mrs. Patterson. The elderly woman who had loved Liam like a grandson, who could have testified about Karen's character, died of a heart attack. The stress had been too much for her old heart. Karen sat in her cell and felt the walls closing in. She had no money, no lawyer who believed in her, no evidence to prove her innocence, no home to return to if she ever got out. And her son was in foster care, being told that his mother was a criminal. Every path was blocked, every hope was crushed, every friend was gone. And somewhere out there, Margaret Hartwell was winning. Karen lay down on her thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. She thought about giving up, about signing whatever papers they wanted her to sign, about letting Liam go to his rich family where he would have everything she could never give him. But then she remembered something her mother had told her years ago, before cancer took her too soon. Everyone carries an invisible weight that others cannot see. The strongest people are not those without burdens, but those who keep walking despite them. Karen had been walking with a heavy load for 5 years. Poverty, loneliness, the constant fear that she wasn't good enough. But she was still walking, and as long as she kept moving, there was a chance. They wanted her to break. They wanted her to give up so they could erase her like they erased Jessica Cole. But Karen Thompson was still breathing, and as long as she was breathing, she would fight. Thomas came to see Karen in jail. She almost didn't recognize him. The confident billionaire from the office building was gone. In his place was a haunted man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Why are you here?" Karen asked through the scratched plastic divider. "Your family is destroying me." "My family is not me." Thomas slid a thick folder across the table. "And I have something to show you." Karen opened the folder and began to read. Medical records proving twins were born to Jessica Cole at County General Hospital. A death certificate listing complications as the cause of Jessica's death, signed by the Hartwell family physician. Financial records showing payments to a lawyer named Bradley Crane to falsify adoption documents. And the most damning piece of all, security footage from Sarah Hartwell's final hospital stay showing Margaret entering her room alone, 2 hours before Sarah died. "Your mother," Karen whispered. "My mother has been destroying lives for decades." Thomas's voice was flat, empty. "She killed Sarah to keep her quiet. She erased Liam to protect the family image. And she's destroying you because you got in her way." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm going to tear my own family apart to give you justice." Thomas met her eyes through the dirty plastic. "But I need you to fight with me." Karen thought of Liam, of the years she had spent loving him, protecting him, building a life for him out of nothing. She thought of the walls of the cell and the months stretching ahead of her, and the hopelessness that had been drowning her. And then she thought of Mrs. Patterson, dead of a broken heart, of Jessica Cole, dead in childbirth, of Sarah Hartwell, dead for knowing too much. "I've been fighting alone for 5 years, Karen said. "You're not alone anymore." Karen looked at the evidence spread across the table. She looked at the man who had every reason to protect his family and had chosen instead to destroy them. "What's the plan?" Thomas leaned forward. "First, we get you out of here." The bail appeal was filed the next morning. Thomas's lawyers were not the tired public defenders Karen was used to. They were sharp-suited sharks who smelled blood in the water. They presented evidence of prosecutorial misconduct. They showed that the witness who had testified against Karen had financial ties to the Hartwell family. They argued that Karen had been denied due process. The judge had no choice but to grant bail. Karen walked out of jail to a crowd of cameras and reporters shouting questions. She could have hidden, could have covered her face and run to the waiting car. Instead, she stopped, looked directly into the cameras, and spoke. "For 5 years, I raised a child with love, sacrifice, and everything I had. The people trying to destroy me have money, power, and lawyers, but they don't have the truth. And the truth is the only weapon that never runs out of ammunition." Elena was waiting for her at the car. "Girl." Elena shook her head in disbelief. "You're on TMZ. You're famous." Karen managed a tired smile. "I look terrible in that mugshot." "Please, you look like a movie heroine, very sympathetic cheekbones." They drove to Elena's apartment, the only home Karen had left. Thomas met them there an hour later with takeout food and a laptop full of evidence. "We have 3 targets," Thomas said, spreading documents across Elena's small kitchen table. Bradley Crane, the lawyer who falsified the adoption papers; Victoria Shaw, who provided false testimony and has been working with my mother for years; and Margaret herself. "How do we get them?" Karen asked. "Bradley is the weak link. He's a coward who did what he was told because he was paid well. If we pressure him, he'll flip to save himself." "And Victoria?" "Victoria sent you those adoption papers." Karen blinked. "What?" Thomas pulled out a financial record. 5 years ago, someone anonymously sent Karen Thompson information about a private adoption opportunity. I traced the payment. It came from a shell company controlled by Victoria. "Why would she do that?" "Because Victoria wants the Hartwell fortune for herself. Her husband, my brother, died before my mother could change the will. Victoria's children get nothing unless the main Hartwell line is discredited." Thomas shook his head. "She's been playing everyone against each other for years, creating chaos she could exploit." "So she's not working with Margaret?" "She's working for herself. She just let Margaret think she was an ally." Thomas smiled grimly. "We can use that." "And Margaret?" "Margaret will never confess willingly. But if we corner her, if we make her think she's already won, she might say something we can use." Karen looked at the evidence, at the plans, at the man who was risking everything to help her. "This isn't about me anymore," she said. "Is it?" Thomas was quiet for a moment. "My mother killed my wife. She took my son away. She's been lying to me my entire life." He met Karen's eyes. "This is about justice for all of us." Elena, who had been listening from the doorway, cleared her throat. "Not to interrupt this very intense moment," she said, "but can we take a second to appreciate that you two are planning to take down a billionaire family from my $40 a month kitchen?" Karen laughed. It felt strange, laughing after everything that had happened, but it also felt good. "One step at a time," she said. "First we get Liam back, then we worry about the rest." But getting Liam back was harder than anyone expected. Margaret had anticipated their move. She had filed emergency motions claiming that Karen was an unfit mother. She had produced psychologists who had evaluated Liam and found him emotionally damaged by his time with Karen. She had convinced a family court judge that Liam should remain in protective custody until the criminal case was resolved. Karen sat in the courtroom and listened to strangers describe her son as broken. "The child exhibits signs of severe attachment disorder," one psychologist said. "He has been conditioned to depend entirely on Ms. Thompson, to the point where separation causes extreme distress." "That's not a disorder," Karen wanted to scream. "That's called loving his mother." But she couldn't scream. She could only sit and watch and feel her heart break into smaller and smaller pieces. The judge ruled against her. Thomas drove her home in silence. "We're not giving up," he said finally. "I know." Karen stared out the window at the city passing by. "But sometimes it feels like the universe is trying to tell us something." "The universe doesn't get a vote." Thomas's voice was fierce. "We're going to win this. We're going to get Liam back. And my mother is going to prison for what she's done." Karen wanted to believe him. But that night, alone in Elena's guest room, she let herself cry. Sometimes you have to break before you can rebuild stronger. Bradley Crane was not a brave man. He had spent 20 years as the Hartwell family lawyer, doing whatever Margaret asked without question. He had falsified documents, hidden evidence, paid off witnesses, and through it all, he had told himself that he was just doing his job. But now, sitting in a coffee shop across from Thomas Hartwell and a woman he had helped frame, Bradley felt the walls closing in. "I have everything," Thomas said calmly. "Financial records, communications, your signature on documents that you had to know were illegal. I was just following orders." "The Nuremberg defense." Thomas smiled without warmth. "See how well that works for you." Bradley's hands were shaking. His coffee sat untouched. "What do you want?" "Testimony. Everything you know about my mother's activities for the past 20 years. The adoption fraud, the payments to doctors and judges, and what happened to Sarah." "If I testify against your mother, she'll destroy me." "My mother is going to prison," Thomas said. The only question is whether you're going with her. Bradley looked at Karen. I'm sorry, I didn't know what she was planning. I thought it was just paperwork. You helped take my son away from me. Karen's voice was quiet. You helped put me in jail. You helped Margaret kill her own daughter-in-law. Sorry doesn't begin to cover it. I'll testify. Bradley's voice was barely a whisper. I'll tell them everything. Victoria Shaw was harder. She was smart, ruthless, and had been playing this game longer than anyone realized. When Thomas and Karen confronted her, she didn't fold. She smiled. You think you figured it all out, Victoria said, but you're missing the big picture. Enlighten us. Victoria crossed her legs and leaned back in her chair. Margaret is a dinosaur. She thinks she can control everything through money and fear. But the world has changed. Information is the real power now. And I have information that could destroy this family 10 times over. You sent Karen the adoption papers, Thomas said. You set this whole thing in motion. I created an opportunity. Victoria shrugged. I didn't know the cleaning lady would actually keep the brat. I figured she'd give him back once she realized who he was. That would have exposed Margaret's little secret without getting my hands dirty. Why? Because Margaret killed my husband. Victoria's smile faded. Everyone thinks Robert died in a car accident, but I found out the truth. Margaret had his brakes tampered with because he was asking too many questions about the family business. Karen felt sick. How many people has she killed? Enough to keep the family's secrets buried. Victoria stood up. I'm not your enemy. Margaret is, and I'm willing to help you take her down as long as I get what I deserve. Which is? Half the Hartwell fortune and immunity from prosecution. Thomas and Karen exchanged looks. It was a devil's bargain, but sometimes you had to work with devils to defeat monsters. Deal, Thomas said. The trap was set. Bradley Crane had agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Victoria Shaw had provided evidence implicating Margaret in multiple crimes. Detective Rosa Martinez, who had been investigating Sarah's death as a cold case, was ready to make the arrest. All they needed was a confession. Thomas arranged a meeting with his mother under the guise of a settlement discussion. Karen would be there. Margaret would think she had won, that Karen was signing over her parental rights in exchange for money and freedom. What Margaret wouldn't know was that the entire room was wired. The meeting was held in a private conference room at the Hartwell family office. Margaret arrived with her lawyer and the confident air of a woman who had never lost anything. Karen arrived with nothing but the clothes on her back and fire in her eyes. Let's make this simple, Margaret said. You sign these papers giving up all claim to the boy. In exchange, you receive $500,000 and the criminal charges disappear. Karen looked at the papers. Her hands were steady. You really think money can fix this? Money fixes everything, dear. That's a lesson you should have learned by now. Like it fixed Sarah? Like it fixed Jessica Cole? Margaret's eyes narrowed. Careful. You're in no position to make accusations. I'm not accusing, Karen smiled. I'm just curious. How does it feel? Taking babies from their mothers, killing women who got in your way, destroying anyone who threatened your precious family image. I did what I had to do to protect what matters. And what matters to you, Margaret? Power, money, control, legacy. Margaret's voice was ice. This family has survived for 4 generations because people like me were willing to make hard choices. Sarah was weak. Jessica was nothing. You are less than nothing. I will not let any of you destroy what we have built. Thomas stepped forward. What about me, Mother? Am I nothing too? Margaret looked at her son with something that might have been regret. You were always too soft, Thomas, too much like your father. But you'll understand eventually, when you're old enough to see the big picture. I see the big picture right now. Thomas pulled out his phone and showed his mother the screen. This conference room has been recording since the moment you walked in. Bradley Crane has agreed to testify against you. Victoria has provided evidence of your involvement in Robert's death, and Detective Martinez has a warrant for your arrest. For the first time in 60 years, Margaret Hartwell's mask cracked. You ungrateful little... I'm not finished. Thomas's voice was cold. Where is my son? Where is Liam? Safe. with people who know how to handle difficult situations. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get. Margaret's composure returned. Sign the papers and you'll see him again. Refuse, and I promise you, no one will ever find that boy. Karen felt her blood run cold. Liam. Margaret had Liam. You're bluffing, Thomas said. Am I? Margaret smiled. You've spent 36 years underestimating me, Thomas. Don't start thinking you're clever now. The door opened. Detective Martinez stepped in, followed by two uniformed officers. Margaret Hartwell, you're under arrest for the murder of Sarah Hartwell, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, falsification of legal documents, and about 15 other charges I'll explain on the way to the station. Margaret didn't resist. She held out her wrists for the handcuffs with the dignity of a queen facing execution. But as she was led past Karen, she leaned in close. The boy is gone, she whispered, and you'll never find him. The next 4 hours were the longest of Karen's life. Police searched the Hartwell properties. Investigators traced Margaret's financial records. Victoria provided names of contacts and associates, but no one could find Liam. Karen sat in a police station conference room and watched the clock tick away the minutes. Every second felt like a lifetime. Every passing hour was a knife in her heart. Thomas was on the phone constantly, calling in favors, pressuring contacts, doing everything a billionaire could do to find one small boy. Elena arrived with coffee and sandwiches that no one ate. Detective Martinez came in with updates that led nowhere. And through it all, Karen held on to one truth. Liam was alive. Margaret wanted leverage, not revenge. She wouldn't hurt him. She wouldn't. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning. Bradley Crane, desperate to prove his usefulness, remembered a name. A woman Margaret had used before for situations that required discretion. Someone who specialized in making people disappear. Marianne Foster, a licensed foster care provider with connections to families looking to adopt children quickly and quietly. The police traced her address. Thomas mobilized a private security team. Karen insisted on coming, even though everyone told her to stay behind. The house was in the suburbs, a normal-looking home on a normal-looking street. Nothing about it suggested the secrets it held. Karen was out of the car before it stopped moving. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was clean, quiet, ordinary. A woman in her 50s sat at the kitchen table, reading a book like she had been expecting them. Mrs. Foster? Detective Martinez showed her badge. We need to speak with you about a child named Liam Thompson. I don't know anyone by that name. We have evidence that Margaret Hartwell paid you to take custody of a 5-year-old boy 2 days ago. The woman's face didn't change. I run a foster home. I have many children in my care. Karen stepped forward. Where is my son? Ma'am, I don't know what you are talking about. Karen felt something snap inside her. The weeks of jail, the months of fear, the years of sacrifice, everything she had endured, everything she had survived, came rushing up at once. I have cleaned houses for rich people for 5 years, Karen said. I have scrubbed their toilets and washed their floors and been invisible while they talked about their problems, like I wasn't even there. I know what liars look like. I know how they move their eyes. I know how they hold their shoulders. And I know you're lying to me right now. Ma'am, my son is in this house. Karen's voice was quiet, but it filled the room. And if you don't tell me where he is in the next 30 seconds, I will tear this place apart with my bare hands. For a long moment, no one moved. Then a small voice came from somewhere above them. Mommy! Karen ran up the stairs, down the hall, following the sound of her son's voice. Liam was in a locked room at the end of the hallway. Karen broke the window with her elbow and reached through to unlock the door from the inside. And then he was in her arms. Mommy! Liam was crying, clinging to her like he would never let go. I knew you would come. I told them you would come. Karen held him so tight it hurt. Tears streamed down her face. Her heart, which had been shattered into a million pieces, began to put itself back together. I will always come for you, she whispered. Always. Behind her, Thomas appeared in the doorway. Olivia was with him, having refused to stay home when she heard her brother might be found. Is it over? Olivia asked. Are we a family now? Karen looked at Thomas, at the twins, reunited after 5 years of separation, at the impossible situation that had somehow brought them all together. "We're figuring it out," she said. Thomas smiled. It was the first real smile Karen had seen from him. "We're figuring it out," he agreed. The trial of Margaret Hartwell lasted 3 weeks. Prosecutors presented evidence of decades of criminal activity. Bradley Crane testified about falsified documents and hidden payments. Victoria Shaw provided recordings and financial records. And most damning of all, the medical examiner testified that Sarah Hartwell's death was not from natural causes. Margaret sat through it all with the same cold composure she had worn her entire life. But when the verdict came, even she couldn't hide her shock. Guilty on all counts: murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, obstruction of justice, falsification of legal documents, and 16 other charges that would ensure she spent the rest of her life in prison. Karen watched from the gallery as Margaret was led away in handcuffs. There was no satisfaction in it, no joy, just a quiet relief that the monster was finally caged. Thomas was beside her, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "It's over," he said. "Is it?" "The trial is over. The danger is over. Margaret can't hurt us anymore." Karen looked at their intertwined fingers. So much had changed in the past year. She had gone from cleaning houses to fighting billionaires to sitting in a courtroom watching justice served. "What happens now?" she asked. Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Now we figure out how to be a family." Victoria Shaw received a reduced sentence for her cooperation. She would serve 3 years for her role in the conspiracy, then be released with a substantial portion of the Hartwell fortune. It wasn't fair, exactly. She had played everyone against each other for her own gain. She had helped create the chaos that had nearly destroyed Karen's life. But she had also provided the evidence that brought Margaret down. And in the calculus of justice, that had to count for something. Bradley Crane received 5 years for his decades of criminal activity. He would be disbarred, of course. His reputation was destroyed, but he would survive. Unlike Sarah, unlike Jessica, unlike Mrs. Patterson, and who knew how many others who had gotten in Margaret's way. The civil settlements came next. Karen received $15 million in compensation for her wrongful imprisonment and the destruction of her property. Thomas insisted on additional support for Liam's future, including a trust fund and guaranteed educational expenses. Karen refused most of it. "I don't want his money," she told Elena. "I didn't fight this battle for a payout." "Girl," Elena shook her head, "take the money. Use it to build a life. You earned it." In the end, Karen accepted enough to buy a small house and start a college fund for Liam. The rest went into a foundation for wrongfully imprisoned mothers, named after Mrs. Patterson. 1 year later, Karen stood in the kitchen of her new home and watched the twins play in the backyard. Liam and Olivia had become inseparable. They went to the same school, had the same friends, finished each other's sentences the way they had the first day they met. Whatever biological connection they shared, whatever mysterious bond allowed twins to sense each other across miles and years, it was stronger than any force that had tried to tear them apart. Thomas came over every weekend. He wasn't trying to take Liam away anymore. He wasn't trying to insert himself into their lives against Karen's wishes. He was just trying to be a father to both his children. It was awkward sometimes, complicated always, but they were making it work. Elena arrived with her usual lack of warning, carrying a bottle of wine and a cake that said, "Happy Anniversary" in crooked letters. "1 year since you got out of jail," Elena said. "I thought we should celebrate." Karen laughed. "Is that really something to celebrate?" "Girl, you fought a billionaire family and won. You exposed a murderer, you got your son back. And you're still standing." Elena poured 2 glasses of wine. "If that's not worth celebrating, I don't know what is." They sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the small yard where the twins were still playing. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened," Elena asked, "if you had never seen Olivia at the park?" Karen thought about it, about the life she would have lived, never knowing the truth, about Liam growing up without knowing he had a sister, about Margaret continuing to destroy lives with impunity. "No," she said finally. "The truth was always going to come out. That's how truth works. You can bury it and hide it and pretend it doesn't exist, but eventually it finds its way to the surface." Very philosophical. "I had a lot of time to think in jail." Thomas joined them on the porch, and for a while they sat in comfortable silence, 3 people who had been through hell together and come out the other side. I've been thinking, Thomas said eventually. About us. Karen raised an eyebrow. Us? We've been co-parenting for a year. We've been through more together than most couples experience in a lifetime. He paused. I don't want to pressure you. I don't have any expectations. But I wanted you to know that if you ever wanted to be more than co-parents, I would be open to that. Karen looked at him, the billionaire who had given up everything to do the right thing. The father who loved his children more than his legacy. The man who had stood beside her when everyone else wanted to tear her down. Maybe, she said. Thomas smiled. I can work with maybe. 2 years after the trial, Karen and Thomas were married in a small ceremony at the courthouse. It wasn't a society wedding. There were no photographers, no 500-person guest list, no coverage in the society pages. Just Karen and Thomas and the twins and Elena and a few close friends who had supported them through everything. Liam walked Karen down the aisle. He was 7 years old now, growing like a weed, with his father's eyes and his mother's determination. Are you sure about this, Mommy? He asked before they started walking. About marrying Thomas? Why wouldn't I be? He's very tall, and his house is very big, and he uses really long words sometimes. Karen laughed. Those are all true things. But you love him? I do. Liam considered this. And he loves you? He does. And Olivia will really be my sister now? Like, officially? Officially and forever. Liam nodded. Okay then, I guess we should go get you married. They walked down the aisle together, mother and son, toward the new life waiting for them. The wedding dinner was at Elena's apartment because some traditions were worth keeping. A toast, Elena said, raising her glass, to Karen, who started this story cleaning houses and ends it living in one, who fought a billionaire family and won, who proved that love is stronger than money and mothers are stronger than everyone. To Karen, everyone echoed. Karen stood to respond. She looked at the people gathered around Elena's small table, her husband, her children, her best friend, the detective who had helped bring Margaret to justice, the small community that had formed around her during the darkest time of her life. I was nobody when this started, Karen said. I had no money, no power, no connections. I had a little boy who I loved more than anything and a fierce determination to protect him. That's all. She paused, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. They thought money could erase me. They thought power could silence me. They thought I was nobody, but I was the one thing they never expected, a mother who refused to quit. And in the end, that was enough. Thomas raised his glass. To mothers. To mothers, everyone repeated. Later, after the dishes were washed and the guests had gone home, Karen sat on Elena's fire escape and looked out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it, expecting spam, and felt her heart stop. Jessica Cole had a sister. Her name is Amanda. She's been looking for the twins for 5 years. She saw the news coverage of the trial. She wants to meet them. Karen stared at the screen for a long time. Then she went inside to find Thomas. We need to talk, she said. The next morning, Karen and Thomas drove to a coffee shop in the suburbs to meet Amanda Cole. She was younger than Karen expected. Mid-30s, with the same sandy brown hair that Liam had inherited. She looked nervous, clutching her coffee cup like it was a lifeline. Thank you for meeting me, Amanda said. I wasn't sure you would. You're their aunt, Karen said. Of course we would. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. I looked for them. After Jessica died, the hospital wouldn't tell me anything. The lawyer said the babies had been adopted through proper channels. I hired investigators, but all the trails led nowhere. Margaret was very thorough, Thomas said grimly. I saw the news about the trial. I couldn't believe it. After all these years, finally knowing what happened to my sister. Amanda wiped her eyes. She loved those babies, you know. She was so scared about being the single mother, but she loved them from the moment she knew she was pregnant. Karen reached across the table and took Amanda's hand. Tell us about her. Tell us about Jessica. Amanda talked for 2 hours, about her sister's laugh, about her kindness, about her dreams of opening a bakery someday, about the man she had loved briefly but intensely during one summer in college. She never blamed Thomas, Amanda said. She understood that he didn't know about the pregnancy. She blamed Margaret. She said that woman had dead eyes. Thomas was quiet throughout most of the conversation. Karen could see the guilt weighing on him, the knowledge that his mother's actions had destroyed so many lives. I want you to know something, Thomas said finally. I loved your sister. It was brief, and I was young, but what we had was real. If I had known about the pregnancy, I would have been there. I would have supported her. I would have raised my children. I know, Amanda said. She knew too. That's why she never tried to contact you. She knew Margaret would destroy everything if she found out. Margaret did find out, Karen said, and she destroyed everything anyway. Not everything. Amanda looked at Karen with something like wonder. You saved them. You raised Liam with love and devotion, not knowing where he came from or who his family was. You fought for him when anyone else would have given up. Jessica would have loved you. Karen felt tears on her cheeks. I wish I could have known her. You know her through her son. Amanda smiled. That's something. That's more than something. They met Amanda many times after that. She became part of their strange, extended family. Aunt Amanda, the twins called her, and she spoiled them shamelessly with baked goods and presents and stories about the mother they would never know. Years passed. Liam and Olivia grew up knowing the truth about their origins. It was complicated, as all family stories are complicated. There were questions that had no good answers. There was grief that would never fully heal. But there was also love. So much love. On Liam's 18th birthday, the whole family gathered at Karen and Thomas's house. The twins were heading off to college together, having refused to be separated after spending their first 5 years apart. Karen stood in the kitchen, watching her children laugh with their friends, and felt a peace she had never thought possible. Elena appeared beside her with a glass of champagne. You did it, Elena said. You raised him. He turned out amazing. He was always amazing, Karen said. I just helped him find his way. Don't be humble. You were a single mom working 2 jobs, and you raised a boy who got into Harvard. That's not nothing. Karen smiled. It's not nothing, she agreed. Thomas joined them, wrapping his arm around Karen's waist. What are we toasting to? To Liam, Elena said. To Olivia, Karen added. To family, Thomas finished. They raised their glasses. Outside, the twins were posing for photos with their arms around each other. 2 halves of a whole, finally reunited. 2 children who had found each other against impossible odds. Karen watched them and remembered all the times she had doubted herself. All the nights she had cried from exhaustion and fear. All the moments she had wondered if she was enough. She thought of Jessica Cole, who had loved her babies so much she died bringing them into the world. She thought of Sarah Hartwell, who had loved Olivia enough to die protecting the truth. She thought of Mrs. Patterson, who had loved Liam enough to watch him for free just because he needed someone. She thought of everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. Every mother who had sacrificed everything for her children. Every person who had been pushed down and overlooked and dismissed as nobody. You are enough, she wanted to tell them. You have always been enough. The world will try to convince you otherwise. The world will point to your empty bank account, your tired eyes, your secondhand clothes. But those things don't define you. What defines you is what you do when everything is against you. What defines you is whether you keep fighting when fighting seems impossible. Karen Thompson had kept fighting, and in the end, that was enough. The past may carry pain and secrets, but it also paves the way for new beginnings. And sometimes the best stories are the ones that happen when nobody is watching. The end. If this story resonated with you, if you know what it feels like to fight alone, to be underestimated, to keep going when giving up would be so much easier, remember this: you are stronger than you think. Your story isn't over, and the people who bet against you are going to be very surprised by how it ends.